one woman who was 80 years old who was terrified of stick shifts. And I remember when she showed up to the lesson, she was visibly shaking. She was so nervous. So we went to our parking lot and we started there. By the end of it, she was driving around Portsmouth with the biggest grin on her face. And at the end of the lesson, she just gave me a big hug and said, you changed my life. And so to have that impact, but also to connect with somebody like that on that type of level as well, was just rewarding, but also opened up the possibility that we can help everybody like this.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the podcast where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place.
Oh, Susie, where are you going now?
My name is Andy DeMeo. This episode was sponsored by and recorded in Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Today, I'm speaking to my friend Cody Whelan. Cody is the creator and owner of Three Petals New England and Treeline Outfitters. Treeline, as you know, is our sponsor and the place where we've recorded most of these episodes. Now you get to meet the person behind it all. We talk about stick shifts, community, Bruce Lee, nature, and a ton of other stuff I hope you enjoy on this episode of Granite Goodness. Cody Whelan, welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you on here. I say that for everybody, and it's true for everybody, but it is especially true for you because I've done 9 of these now. You're the 10th, and for half these episodes, they've been recorded here. Treeline Outfitters, your space. I say it in every episode. I'm like, thanks to Treeline Outfitters, for the space, or sponsored by them, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm really happy that I was able to get you on because, you're Treeline Outfitters, And so my vision is that on this journey, like, people will listen to these episodes and they'll be like, what is Treeline Outfitters? What is Treeline Outfitters? Who's this mysterious place where they're recording and they're sponsoring? And I'm glad that in the first kind of wave of these episodes, people are going to get the opportunity to learn about you and who you are and what you're about and what you're doing here. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. I remember when you first came to me with this idea for a podcast and you were looking for spaces to host the podcast. You came to me and said, hey, would you be okay if we set something up where I can host it here, maybe at the bar while there are people in here during operating hours? And I thought, well, maybe it would be a little loud and cumbersome, but it definitely a great, exciting idea. And thinking back to why we created Treeline Outfitters in the first place was really for connection. It was this connection of people, of places, of brands, of the outdoors. And so that perfectly fit right into why we exist, for that connection piece of it all. And so for you to connect with the community, with your podcast guests, and do that at a place that is attempting to create more of that, was a perfect match. So I'm thrilled to have you consistently here at Treeline, and it just adds a great energy to the space.
That all makes me so happy. We should tell the story of how we met, because I tell my friends this and they're like, that is so, well, maybe I'm projecting. I think it's really cool. And I assume that when other people hear their story, they're like, man, that is really cool, right? So about a year ago, we were doing the 5th or the 6th Sustainability Brews. This very casual networking group for people who work in sustainability or want to work in sustainability around the New Hampshire seacoast. And I knew that my wife and I were about to buy a farm. We knew we wanted a truck, and we love those Japanese mini trucks, the K trucks. Cody's making a face right now and he's being polite and letting me tell the story. And it had been a while since I'd driven a stick shift. Like, all the K trucks, the old ones are manual transmission, and so I needed lessons, right? So I'm in a cafe one day in Dover, and I'm trying to find, I know I'm moving to a farm and I'm getting this truck. I have no idea what I'm doing. I see a flyer for a thing called Three Pedals New England. And it is like the day after I got my truck, and it's the most perfect thing. I said, oh my God, it's a manual transmission driving school in the Seacoast area of New Hampshire. This is unbelievable. And so I take a picture of it, and then I'm going to Sistina Billabrews the next night. My friend Ian, who's going to come on here later, says, hey, my friend Cody is interested in this stuff. He might open a tap room or some kind of thing in Portsmouth in the next year. Do you mind if he comes? I said, of course not. So you come, I think. And then we get to chat, and I think I tell you about my K-Truck, and I said, Cody, you'll never believe what I found the other day. I've been trying to find someone who will teach me how to do manual transmission on a car, and there's this person operating a driving school in the Seacoast called Three Pedals New England. Is that what? And then what? And then you were like, that's me.
That's me.
That's me. Is that how you remember that story?
Pretty similar to that. I remember being approached by Ian, our good friend, and him mentioning Sistina Billabrews. I had proposed the idea to him of what it was that I was opening here at Treeline, and the through line and themes of sustainability. So he invited me to Sistina Billabrews, where you and I connected for the first time, I think, at North Country Cider in Dover.
Yeah.
And, great to meet you, great connections, great people at the event, and was excited for the next one. Didn't really think much beyond of how the sustainability connections would have a through line to Three Pedals. And I remember seeing an appointment come through on the email, Andy DeMeo, and I thought, how many Andy DeMeos are there in the world? Is this the same that I met? It must have been a few weeks, maybe a month after.
There's actually like 7 of us.
Oh, are there?
Yeah, I've tried to find the other Andrew DeMeos. This is another tangent we can go down, but I think there's only one in this area who booked a lesson with you at this time.
And I remember receiving that email, thinking, well, must be a coincidence. There's a couple Cody Whalens in the area, or at least a couple of Whalens.
Seriously? So. You thought it was a coincidence?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, in my mind, I didn't think this will be the same Andy, because the name, there have been many names that had come and gone.
Sure.
Building this space out with the contractors and all the connections. And
he could have been the plumber. Who knows?
You never know.
Yeah.
And then not only is it the Andy DeMeo from Sistina Billabrews, but you come with one of my all-time favorite vehicles, a K-Truck, one that I've been lusting after.
Meant to be.
For years and years. And what better way to reconnect from Sistina Billabrews than go drive a K-Truck together?
Oh, that's right. Because we did meet. We did meet at Brews, and then I think some time passed before I booked a lesson with you, right? And this was all. Now it's all coming back to me. That's fine. I have a completely different, like, in my version of the story, events that took place across like 6 months are condensed into 3 days. But your version is more accurate.
Time often does that.
Yeah. So I did take a driving lesson with Cody. It was extraordinary. I mean, my mom knows how to drive a stick. I know how to drive a stick. I learned how to do it in college. And at that time, I had thought, my final semester at UNH, I was commuting to Durham from Manchester. And for our listeners who don't know, that's like, it's like an hour. So it's not nothing for a commute for a student. And I didn't have a car. My friend was backpacking in Europe or something, and I knew she had a car. And she was so kind to let me borrow her car for that semester. And she had, sorry, Tori, just an absolute junk box of a car from like 1997 or something. And it still worked. And I remember thinking to myself, if I can learn how to drive manual transmission on this vehicle, I'll be set for life. I'll be able to drive anything. And so I did. And I wasn't that good at it, but I was able to get around. And little did I know that 5 or 6 years later, I would be attempting to drive an even older, more difficult manual transmission car that not only is, 2 years older than the crappy car I drove in college, but because it's Japanese, the wheel is on the opposite side and the stick is, I guess the stick's in the middle, but it would be on the left side of the driver, right? I needed lessons. It was like a manna from heaven running into you. It was meant to be.
Just that reconnection from Sistina Billabrews to Three Pedals, and then again following Three Pedals back here to Treeline. It's just a fun twist and turn through how we developed the relationship to you and I sitting down here recording this podcast.
I had such a great experience with you that, I asked my wife, Jess, to take a lesson from you because I tried to teach her, and I'm a horrible teacher at driving. And it's hard too. You try and teach your loved ones something. There's a whole other amount of baggage there that's it's better to have an impartial, instructor a lot of the time. She came home from that lesson with you and she was like, I know how to drive this truck so well. Cody is an amazing instructor, and she's better at driving it than myself.
Confirmed.
Yeah, by a wide margin. One of my favorite things about you, Cody, is that within minutes of meeting you, anybody can tell that you are a person who does stuff. You're a doer. You're an entrepreneur. You have all these things going on, and they're all so interesting. And I met you through 3 Pedals. I mean, it's a passion for you, but it's also, it's a business. Can you tell me the story of 3 Pedals New England? The whole enchilada of Cody Whelan. I want to know about all that.
All right, well, sit back and get comfy. This starts when I was a child. So thinking about this, just thinking about coming onto the podcast and sharing the story about primarily Treeline, I suspect, but also 3 Pedals, and really taking a dive internally to figure out where they all came from. I mean, it's easy enough to, in my mind, see the through line and the trajectory as hindsight, but then to be able to speak to that and clearly articulate each of the pivotal moments that occurred through life and through the journey to get to this point is definitely a little bit more difficult. So as I was thinking about it, I realized that it all started, I hate to say, when I was a child, but growing up, I grew up in Deerfield, New Hampshire, a rural area, 45 minutes away from everything, except, thankfully, the trails.
Right.
Bear Brook State Park, Pawtuckaway State Park. So a lot of these areas were just in our backyard, and my parents, thankfully, always prioritized getting outside. And so it was this already becoming used to getting up and moving, creating motion. There's this need for action, for movement, and it's not sit down and relax, which certainly has its place, but there was always this movement, and it was always movement toward the outdoors. That turned into this appreciation for what was out there, what was beneath our feet. My mother is a huge gardener, and it was always about getting your hands dirty, but then appreciating the small things, about looking at each of the bugs on all of the leaves. And it's not just the enjoyment of the flower or the fruit or the vegetable that you get from gardening, but each of the pieces in between, all of the bugs that are along for the ride, and helping curate the garden and keep it alive and flourishing.
Yeah.
And likewise, that occurred on the trails as well. We'd stop and look at a really cool tree or a mushroom that was the size of my face, which is fascinating. So it wasn't just about constant forward motion. It was also about taking the time to look around, to look down, look up, look on either side, be aware of and realize and discover this awe of what's around us. And really just a magic outside that exists that I don't think a lot of people think much about. But we all know that feeling of that first breath of fresh air when it's first cold, you get that sting in the lungs, or the smell of summer after a long winter.
It's a New Hampshire. It's a very special New Hampshire experience.
It certainly is.
Other people have it, but it's special here, I think.
So this really was what got me interested in, I guess, the direction for interest and a passion and just a general awe for the outdoors, but also just that constant push for movement, for action, not just for the sake of it, but for exercise and to appreciate and for the awareness of what's around us. So fast forward, that really pushes me into studying geology at UNH. Again, this opportunity to discover what is around us. My neck still hurts from looking down at all the rocks on all the hikes, but I suppose it prevented me from tripping more frequently than if I were, say, a meteorologist looking up at the clouds all the time.
Right.
So that then led me into the environmental industry, which I thought was going to be this great thing. I was a geologist going into an industry where I had an opportunity to work outside just about every day. I was able to be near a drill rig, looking at cores of both overburden, the soil and consolidated material, and bedrock, looking at water chemistry, kind of this holistic view of cleanup of contaminated sites.
Yeah.
And about 8 years in the industry, working from field staff to project manager through a couple of different companies, it just seemed as though there was something missing, this awe, this magic that didn't exist there. And also, just looking ahead, I remember having a discussion with a company-sponsored financial advisor about 401ks and why you should invest in your 401k. That got my mind, the gears turning about, okay, well, there's a future that I need to be saving for.
Yeah.
I had just bought this older 2-seat convertible BMW. It was great fun. Certainly not the best financial decision I could have ever made. And it really got me thinking about, okay, well, if there is to be saving up for the retirement, for the later years,
Right.
What does that mean for the interim? So that really is what pushed me toward thinking about investing and stock markets and CDs and all these exciting things. So I really took a deep dive into discovering how best to manage my own money.
Yeah.
Was instead of being fascinated by day trading and trying to optimize every penny and always win, 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 what I found most exciting was reading about the stories of people who were successful in these industries. And so it wasn't watching YouTube videos about how to optimize your day trading strategy. It was actually reading biographies and autobiographies about the owners of these investment firms, how they got to where they are, what their story was. And it turns out that they are making tons of money by helping other people make a bunch of money. And so looking at the opportunity there of, okay, well, the real wealth generation, even if you look at it purely from a financial perspective, is by investing in yourself
Yeah.
first, taking a risk,
Right.
being so clear in what it is that you're capable in and what your vision is and what your passion is. That is where the wealth is going to be created. And wealth comes in many forms, not just financial, the spiritual side of it as well, health, family, friends. So I realized that was the step that needed to be next taken, because what was missing from what I thought was going to be my career for the rest of my life was this investment in myself through realizing my own vision. I had been thinking about something like this, like Treeline, for the last 15, 20 years.
Right.
And always thought, oh, well, one day, everybody has a dream of opening up a cafe in Paris, but it never, ever happens for most people because they just are unwilling to take the risk. And
That's season 2.
Yeah. That's the next Treeline Outfitters you'll find in Paris.
That's right. Treeline Outfitters. Sorry.
But from there, that really got my gears turning about, okay, looking now internally as opposed to externally at how do I create wealth for the future. Wealth for the future is a great thing. It's a lot of security. It's a lot of comfort. But you sacrifice today. You sacrifice what's happening right now in front of you. And that just didn't really sit well with me. There's, of course, the desire to have that wealth long term and be that generational inflection point so that your kids and your kids' kids, great grandkids have the opportunity to better themselves in their own lives. But like I said, it just didn't sit right with me that all of this work meant that today was going to suck. And tomorrow was also probably going to suck. But 20 years, 30, 50 years from now, when you were decaying, presumably, you can spend, buy as many BMW convertibles as you want.
Who wants to start living when, not that older folks don't have really cool things going on or great quote, like my mom's old and retired, and sorry, Mom, you are retired. And, she leads a deeply interesting life, right? There is something to be said for psychologically not wanting to wait for quote unquote your life to begin until you have total financial freedom or whatever, right? It's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And this ties back into my time spent on the trails, where it was looking at the awe, looking at the time to stop, literally smell the roses, enjoy the mushroom, look at the flowers, look at the habit, at the petals, at the bugs, the bees that are the pollinators that are carrying the pollen and keeping everything so colorful in the world. That was the immediate awe that was also missing from the career. And so that really was this, not immediate, as most things are not, or overnight in any sense, but this point around 2019, 2020, just before COVID, that really got me thinking, how do I invest in myself? What is it that I am so passionate in, believe so deeply and truly in, that I need to share this with other people? Because it's inside of me. It's there. I know it is, but I want to get this out to the world and hopefully connect with other people who feel this way and use this belief to help others discover their own belief. And so I thought about what I had been doing up to that point. I knew that I didn't want that. I didn't have the passion for what I was doing as a career.
Right.
One thing I always loved doing, I love driving. But not just driving for the sake of getting from A to B. It's driving a manual for me. It's that full engagement with the vehicle, which in turn provides engagement with the world around you. I'd already taught most of my friends how to drive a stick. I had taught a bunch of family members, and at some point I ran out of friends and family to teach how to drive a stick. So I thought, well, there must be other people out there.
Can I teach you again?
There were some follow-ups, and still to this day are. But I thought there must be other people out there who want to learn but don't have access to a friend, a family member, or they do, and they're just not ideal teachers. Much like you said, there's plenty of baggage associated with teaching.
There's a whole market of wanting to learn this, just not from someone who's in your family, because it can be a pain in the butt.
Oh, absolutely. And many stories have come from, well, my partner, husband, wife, friend tried to teach me, and it ended with tears and screaming.
Yeah, I was ready to kill him by the end, right?
That point, realizing that, okay, I want to start investing in my own passion, my own values. Where does that lead me? A lot of time spent with a pen and piece of paper trying to get what was in my head out and clearly identify it and describe it for myself, as well as ideally for others. And so the first thing that came to mind was driving manual transmissions.
Yeah.
Passionate about it, loved it. And I truly to this day believe that if everybody knew how to drive a stick shift, whether they chose to drive one or not, would just be a kinder, happier human being because of that connection. Again, that connection piece consistently comes back to it. You're connected with the vehicle.
Yeah.
You're connected with everything around you. And ideally then at that point connected with other drivers on the road, which is a pretty critical piece to sharing the road and driving. And also being a cyclist.
Yeah.
Also sharing the road, the tiny little shoulders. Oftentimes I am very thankful when other motorists are aware of what's around them.
Right.
And not on their phone, or as I've seen some people with their foot out the window as they're driving.
Oh, wow.
While on their cell phone.
How do you even do that?
In an automatic, you can have your left foot out the window to get some nice air between the toes.
Yeah. Hey, preventing athlete's foot. Whatever you can do, right?
Or if you need to air it out.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best way. So that is really what got Three Pedals kick-started, was this whole through line of...
Should have said jump started.
Missed opportunity there.
That's great.
Was that, that sense of discovering awe in the immediate, in the now, while also looking to the long term, looking inward to discover what those values and that passion is, and then also wanting to share that with other people. So I developed a small little plan on how I was going to teach people. And it turns out that was completely different than what I call YouTube University was teaching. So what I did was I took a couple of friends and I said, watch these YouTube videos. Now let's go try to drive in my car.
Yeah.
After that, I'd say 90% of the time was not as successful as we would like it to be. We then took the plan that I developed, which has nothing to do with let's go as fast as we can, pop that clutch, get on the gas.
Yeah.
It was a lot more relaxed.
Sure.
We slowed everything down. And that not only had a better end result, but that was likely a result of letting everybody just take the time to slow down. Every video you watch, it seems to be about speed, power, get on it, get off this. And it's just shouting instructions, which is likely why when people try to teach other people how to drive stick, it doesn't go so well. Wait, get on the gas, get off the clutch, and off you go.
Right.
And it's usually those words at that pace.
Yeah.
So the key is just to slow down, become aware of not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it.
Yeah.
So that it's the self-awareness that we actually teach. And it just so happens that you then get to learn how to drive a manual by becoming self-aware of what you're doing as well as aware of what's around you.
There's so many more angles to this than I ever imagined. I'm in love with everything that you're saying. It's like the Zen Buddhist approach to driving a clutch. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but you know what I mean? Like, step in the vehicle and experience the Tao. It's extraordinary. But there is something, I really like that philosophy. Let's appreciate this technology that we all take for granted, right? Automobiles, right? Particularly modern automobiles. If you showed anyone 100 years ago a modern car, they would think that's extraordinary. Everyone has a relationship with their car, particularly Americans, right? We're a very car-oriented culture. If you drive a stick, you have to be a little closer to your car than you would otherwise. You have to understand all these different parts of it and how it works. And, you know, there is kind of a one with the machine mindset that, you know, you can get lost in. It's a little bit like Marissa, I was telling you, who does the toy library. She, you know, has learned a lot about the psychology of play for children, right, in early childhood development. And she described play to me as, you know, this flow state where you lose track of time and, you know, kind of your sense of self. And it's just this aware, blissful state. And I think that driving certainly is that for you, but you show other people that through your passion for it. Like, I'm a testimonial. I thought it was cool before, and then you showed me how to really appreciate my vintage Japanese truck that I love, and literally took an experience that was very frustrating and confusing for my wife. And she came home and said, I love driving this truck. I understand it now in a way that I never did before and thought I was never going to, thanks to Cody. That's really what happened. I'm not even exaggerating. And that's extraordinary. And it sounds maybe a little silly, but I think there is a legitimate and smart, enjoyable and strategic angle to saying, this isn't just driving a car. For me, it's a passion, it's awareness. It's a very kind of like Buddhist, I don't know, philosophy of why you should care about driving stick shifts, right? And it's safer, as you say. If people have to pay more attention to the road, which everyone knows is a big problem, you're going to drive safer.
My favorite thing when first teaching and when we get out onto the road portion of a 3-pedals lesson is we'll come up to a stop sign, turning right onto even just a residential area. There'll be a car off in the distance, and the client will often say, well, I'll just let them go. And in no other scenario would most of these people, myself included in some scenarios, wait that long just to let somebody else go.
Right.
And of course, there's a certain level of, you know, not fear necessarily, but okay, I'm thinking about what it is that I have to do, and I don't want to be thinking about the steps while trying to pull out in front and then also have somebody right behind me and also have cut somebody off. But it's this process of thinking through each of the steps that then just sets you down to, well, I will let them go. And again, it comes down to we're in no rush. We're all going to get where we're going.
Yeah.
So it's better to just let them go, wait a moment, and continue on. And I think just after you and your wife had come through, I started letting people know, I started telling people that 3-pedals is like a yoga class. You've actually signed up for a yoga retreat for 2 hours.
But you don't put your foot out the window to stretch.
Exactly.
That's what you don't do.
Yeah. But it's all about these slow, intentional movements. There's confidence in the movement. There's intentionality behind it, but it doesn't need to be about speed. I say 1,000 times in these lessons, slow is smooth is fast, but we never need to get to the fast. Let's just get smooth.
Yeah.
And it's that part of it that we really try to hit home on, as opposed to, again, the typical, well, come on, just get on the gas and get off that clutch. you're going to burn it. You're going to damage the clutch. They're pretty strong things.
Yeah.
They'll hold up.
A friend of mine is a Tai Chi instructor, and he would say the exact same thing. You would have a great conversation with him. It's exactly that ideology. What's that great Bruce Lee quote? I don't fear the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times.
Chills.
Don't fear the driver who's practiced how to shift transmission 1,000 times. You don't have to fear them. Another thing I wanted to point out that I think is really cool. You mentioned YouTube University, and I'm a big fan. A lot of people, I think, find it very helpful and convenient to look up, right? Like, this is an incredible thing in the modern world. You can learn how to do pretty much anything, right, on YouTube. Driving in particular, it's a high stakes, high risk activity to partake in relative to making a sandwich, right? Like, you could really get hurt if you don't know what you're doing, you're not paying attention. I like that you are open-minded about that, and you don't see virtual education as a threat to what you do. You provide an environment that I think is missing from that equation, right? To go from 0 to 60, right? Pun intended, right? To start at having no awareness of how to drive a manual transmission car, to watch a bunch of videos on how to do it, and then to go and try and practice yourself. I don't think that would work really well for most people. They need, great if you can learn from the videos, but having an environment that's safe and relaxed and comfortable and all those things that you provide. Again, another personal example, my wife Jess, we watched dozens of videos on how to drive a stick shift, and it did not click for her. I'm sure that helped a little bit, but it didn't click until she sat with you for a good 2 hours. And then it was like butter, right?
It's absolutely incredible that you can learn just about anything in the world. The only downside is that everybody thinks they can learn just about anything in the world from a 20-minute video.
Right.
And who is the person creating that 20-minute video?
Right.
Oftentimes
they could have no
they
idea.
have a YouTube channel, and they're pumping content out. Not being a YouTuber, I can't imagine that this is everyone out there. But there's also this lack of, in some cases, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, maybe there's a lack of credentials. There's motives just to get more videos out, to get the channel some traction. And so it's this missed opportunity for, again, a real meaningful connection. And that's not to say that there aren't channels and certain videos out there that are actually creating that, and there's intense value packed into a 20-minute long YouTube video. But there's a lot of content out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think, misses in on the connection piece, and also just that tactile experience. You can hear something said 1,000 times about what to do, but until you actually experience it, you'll have no idea. I mean, somebody can tell you 1,000,000 times it's best not to wear cotton while hiking, especially in colder climates, because you'll sweat. It doesn't dry, cools you down. The wind starts, you start to cool off a lot faster. Hypothermia can set in. You can hear that 1,000,000 times, but until you experience it, hopefully you never do.
Right.
It just doesn't have that same effect. And so I think that's the positive is you can learn to code, you can learn to trade stocks, you can learn to do so many things, but the pieces and the skills that require a tactile experience, I think, require an in-person component to it to become truly proficient.
You watching a video and you learning the thing are not necessarily the same thing, right? Those goals or outcomes are not aligned in principle. And I think you're right to point that out. I'm going to make a very belabored metaphor right now, because on my way here today, I did actually drive behind you while you were on your bike, which is incredible. Biked here from Dover, which is, 15 miles?
Just shy of, yeah.
That's a lot. I could tell from your calves. I could tell everyone apart by their calves. I said, those are Cody's calves. I'm going to keep that in. There's some construction going on in Portsmouth right now. I was driving to Treeline Outfitters. You were driving to Treeline Outfitters. And we both had to take a bit of a detour. You see where I'm going with this? How did you get on the path of life, on your way, our way, here, right now, but you're really yours, because I want to know about you. Tell me about your path to Treeline Outfitters. There must have been something like a detour, because you said this is an idea that's been floating around in your head for a while. Give me the whole thing, detours and all.
What a smooth transition you just made there from talking about
I don't think that was that smooth.
videos to getting back to, I guess, why we're here in the first place is to talk about a bit more about Treeline Outfitters. Very suave.
That was as smooth as crunchy peanut butter.
There's some smooth bits between the crunchy bits.
Yeah, exactly right. There's something there, but some people just prefer no crunch.
I would have just edited out this long pause here and gone right into Treeline. So that was well done, well crafted.
No. This is. Sometimes I'll be talking and I'll say really nice, and then I'll be listening to it later and I'll be like, what the are you talking about? And that's the part that I will get rid of. Tell us the story.
Treeline, again, going back to time spent in the woods, really was this awe of the natural world around us, and how when you just stop and look a little bit closer, how phenomenally magical it actually is. I mean, looking at the petals on a flower, the wings of a butterfly, and slowing down to actually inspect and discover and realize the variation, the diversity, everything that exists there is just, I'm constantly in awe of what's around us. But oftentimes, especially when I was in the environmental field, it all just gets missed. It's, that's a nice bed of flowers. But when you actually look at the bed of flowers, there's 100 different species in that bed. If you look into the dirt, there's probably 1,000 different species of bugs and worms and bacteria and mycelium. There's so much life everywhere around us. So that really created the awe of getting outside. And so I just wanted to be outside as frequently as possible. And more as when I went into the environmental field, more and more it was a way of just, detoxing and reducing stress and finding a way just to silence and quiet the mind a little bit while still discovering what's around. So I've just always had that passion for getting outside. But Treeline had been sitting there as a thought again, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I had no idea. Definitely was not become an environmental scientist, although for a little bit it was. But definitely through high school, definitely through college, I always had just this little thought in the back of my mind, like, it'd be cool to have a gear shop when I grew up. I've always loved, of course, getting outside. And there's the gear component of that and the apparel side of it that makes getting out there a little bit more enjoyable. Again, you can wear flip-flops, jeans, and a cotton t-shirt and have your Poland Springs 12-ounce water bottle, and that is certainly enough to go for a small walk. But in order to get yourself to the summit of Washington, to do the Prezi Traverse, to do these larger targets, these larger goals, it's always better to have the right gear. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
Yeah.
And so starting to discover what I would like to have, and of course it's not a need. That's the great thing about hiking in particular, is anybody can get out and hike. You don't need anything special. You just need your 2 feet and a place to go. That's why I love hiking so much. But the gear side of that, I was constantly intrigued by what it was that I could discover, and when I would connect with other people on the trail, especially with mountain biking, it's gear galore, and hearing them talk about why they were passionate about their specialized stunt jumper and all the new group sets and bike shoes and helmets and sunglasses that everybody had on. I was just fascinated by these brands and what they were offering. And was it truly better? And then looking into the brands themselves, realizing that these brands are just collections of people. And so again, the through line here of having discovered that, in the investment world, the true wealth generation are the people who own the investment firms, not necessarily just the, day traders and or investors themselves, realizing that the brands where that value was being created, making somebody's experience in the outdoors a little bit more comfortable, a little bit better, is coming from a group of people making decisions for a brand. And to begin realizing this connection piece of it, and there's a lot of people-to-people engagement that's required for the gear side of it. of course, being alone in nature is one of the great things, but there's also always the requirement, for me at least, to have that connective piece. And I think the word connection will appear in this podcast 1,000 times, maybe 10,000, but that good. Really seems to be the through line that I've found throughout the journey of opening up Treeline and Three Petals. And I guess a quick little side note in relation to connection is an unexpected side effect. I guess it wouldn't be called a side effect, but an unexpected side effect of Three Petals was the connections that I made. I mean, even just with you, it wasn't just a way of me to teach other people how to drive a stick and make some money on the side to pay for the vehicle. It was this, I get to connect with some incredible, incredible people, yourself included, folks who are...
Other people. Other people too.
Whether they're CEOs of a company, they're a stay-at-home mom. We had one woman who was 80 years old who was terrified of stick shifts. Her now husband said, you know what, it's time to learn. I'm not the right person to teach you. At least they had the realization of that.
Yeah.
And I remember when she showed up to the lesson, she was visibly shaking. She was so nervous. So we went to our parking lot and we started there. By the end of it, she was driving around Portsmouth with the biggest grin on her face. And at the end of the lesson, she just gave me a big hug and said, you've changed my life.
Yeah.
And so to have that impact, but also to connect with somebody like that on that type of level as well, was just rewarding, but also opened up the possibility that we can help everybody like this. Whether it's, how can we change other people's lives by teaching people to drive stick? In this case, in Treeline's case, how do we change lives in this particular business or venture? And so far, we've had a couple of folks come through who now are going on bike rides together.
Yeah.
They go on hikes together. They've connected here at Treeline, and they are now great friends doing things together. And they're now inviting us along on that journey and discovering things that we never would have discovered otherwise. And so, I mean, that already goal accomplished.
Right.
Now let's just replicate that 1 billion times.
Yeah.
And keep that flywheel going.
I'm going to butcher this because it's like his most famous thing, but you know that guy Simon Sinek? He gave this TED Talk. It's like the one that made him famous, I think called like Find Your Why or something, right? And he drew this really cool chart about why he thought that Apple was a really fascinating company. And everyone thinks that you should start with, hey, we want to sell computers to you so that you can do cool stuff and then change the world, right? Like computers is the center of the chart going outward. And the point that he was trying to make to everyone was a company like Apple or companies that are the most innovative or people, whether you're in business or not, the smarter way to think about it that he was pointing out was they start with, we want to change the world by empowering people with great products. We just happen to make computers. Exactly how you talked about what Three Petals is for you, whether this is accurate or not, but I'm interpreting what you're saying as, I want to connect with people. I want to help them feel more aware and comfortable and present of the world around them. I just happen to teach how to drive manual transmission vehicles. You're not saying, I know how to teach stick. I want to make a bunch of money. And if people have a good time along the way, like, no, it's the other way around. And I think that's the reason why it's gone so well for you and you have such a great time and everyone else has such a great time. Like, it's a really beautiful thing. So do you think about Treeline in similar terms? Tell me how wrong this is. We want to connect great people together who enjoy being outdoors. We want to make sure they're able to do that by having, the coolest gear that's also really sustainably sourced. We just happen to have those things intersect at a retailer and tap room.
Spot on.
Is that off the mark?
Yeah, podcast over. We've got it now.
We did it. I don't need to interview you because I'm putting words in your mouth.
That is exactly what kickstarted Treeline. It was having gone hiking, mountain biking, skiing, wherever we went, it always seemed that we would encounter our neighbors on the trail, on the lift, at the local brewery during Après. And it got me thinking, because this all occurred typically up in the White Mountains, over in the Green Mountains, up where there is kind of the more outdoor space to recreate in, a bit more elevation than exists here on the seacoast.
My wife went for a hike this morning and ran into our neighbors.
That's exactly why Treeline exists.
Yeah.
It's because we continuously were connecting, quite literally, in some cases, with our neighbors. And most of the time, it was Hey, I'm Cody. Good to meet you. I'm from Dover, New Hampshire. Where do you live? Oh, I also live in Dover. Oh, really? Whereabouts?
Yeah.
Oh, we're only 5 houses down. You go to the same establishments. We do all these same sports. How come we have never connected?
Yeah.
Where is there a spot that we would have connected other than, of course, on the trail? And how do we now stay connected? Because that's the big piece, of course, is we just all want to have fun out there.
Right.
All be in awe that we get to ride a bike, go skiing, go for a hike in these spectacular locations. But there's nowhere for us to connect. We have some of the gear stores, but typically it's a solo experience when you go in there. You're there for a purpose, to find a backpacking meal or micro spikes. So there's always an intent to go in that doesn't include having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
It's for a purpose to get your gear. Hopefully it's the right gear. If not, probably buy it anyway because you need it, and out you go. And there's oftentimes no connection with that gear. Maybe there's a rack of puffies and they range in price from $100 to $600. You like the color of the $600 one, but $100 is a lot more appealing. And so you get that one, even though it's not your favorite color, and it's actually the lowest quality, but there's no connection to any of the pieces. And so you just grab that one and go. So again, that solo experience with no connection, either with the gear that it is that you're going in for, or more importantly, with the people that are also in there. And so my thought was, well, we're meeting our neighbors on the trail. There's also this experience of where we all go to, which is, oftentimes the outdoor sports shops, and there's no connection over there. So how do we get the connection that we have on the trail and add that into this place that we all frequent anyway, to go spend too much money on new gear and nutrition and all these other things? How do we get that to happen? How do I get to connect with other like-minded people who love getting outside?
Yeah.
It just didn't exist. And I thought, okay, well, once we are, let's say that everybody goes and hangs out at the local gear shop. How do you get people to stay there, feel comfortable, sit down? You can't just have a corner with 5 chairs in a circle and a fake fire pit and say, okay, now go connect. That just, A, doesn't feel authentic.
And that would never happen anyway. Like a typical retailer, they're designed to be like, get in, get out. We want to process customers as fast as possible, right? There's advantages to that approach, but a serious disadvantage is you have lost any sense of, connection or relationship building. It's why people go to the farmer's market. The relationship is very important.
Yeah, is the sole purpose of the transaction to generate wealth for yourself? Or is the purpose of the transaction to develop a relationship out of that transaction?
Right.
And here at Treeline, I care about that connective piece, that relationship piece. And it's, yes, we often carry products, apparel, gear that is more expensive than what you can find at other places, but it's because there is a connection to be made with the apparel, with the brand, with the gear, because it has an impact, and because the people behind that brand, oftentimes it's a founder and a co-founder, and it's just those two people who are creating the product and making the brand happen and grow. But it really all comes down to the relationship piece of it. Yeah. That's really what it is that we're looking for. And despite being the most connected that we've ever been in the existence of humans, there's also this loneliness crisis where everybody feels more lonely despite the fact that we are more connected. And so that the connection is more frequent, but less impactful, less meaningful.
Right.
And so let's stop that meaningless surface level connection and create something that actually has a positive impact for everybody involved, including the people behind the brands, but in particular in the community in which these are all happening, these transactions.
Yeah. What I am absolutely convinced of is that optimizing all the time, forever, and every way, everywhere for what is cheapest and most convenient is not always the best thing. And I think the loneliness thing is a good example of that. If you live in an apartment complex, or even like in a suburban neighborhood, that's a better example. If you don't need your neighbors for anything, you may never see them. Like if you have everything that you could ever need in your little house kingdom, you don't ever have to go outside. There's no rational reason to do so. And there's some things that are really good about that, but there are a lot of things that are not so good. there are downsides to not having community. What I think is so interesting about how you've described Treeline to me so far is you just gave me a beautiful, intentional story about how the value of outdoors and being with people outdoors and, the whole ecosystem of connections that exists in that space is important to you. And you want to facilitate more of that. That's kind of your angle for having a space like this. And the sustainability stuff, right? The brands that you have here, you know the people, they're more intentional about where they source their materials and such. That's the angle that I geek out on, but all the other stuff is just as amazing. I mean, it's all community, and we should all get outside more with our friends, right? Like, that's what we're here to do. You do a lot of stuff here at Treeline. One thing that I want to ask you about is, clearly from the beginning, you've had a vision for something, right? Something intentional, something where people can come together in community. But have there been parts of this experience where you've iterated on that vision, or you've, adjusted things or learned?
There's been a lot more clarity around the relationship between people, other people, and the outdoors. And I guess honing in on that a little bit, zooming in, I thought that when we first opened Treeline, something that was really impactful for me, that was a cornerstone of why we started this in the first place. And what I thought other people were going to resonate with very loudly was the sustainability component of this. Apparel is made with 98% recycled materials.
Right.
The factory that this is made in pays 125% local wages.
Yeah.
Fully solar powered. They recycle 100% of the water used in not just the plant itself, for the dyeing process, for everything. Everything's recycled. And these facts, these kind of exclamation points of sustainability really haven't hit as deep as I was hoping, as they do for me.
Right.
But I think the transition there that we've noticed is we need to become better storytellers at what it is that we're doing, because it comes down to not just that's great that these are the facts. That's a wonderful fact.
Right.
How does it impact me? How does it impact others? And again, it comes down to the people component of it.
Yeah.
And so it's building relationships between our customers, our brands, and the people that are a part of the brands, and the people that the brands are impacting outside of it. So brands like BioLite, who are providing electricity, solar panels, emergency lighting, power grid systems to local communities in third world countries. That's a huge piece of what BioLite is doing, and that translates directly into the headlamps and the camping lights and the power packs that we have here. It's absolutely amazing that BioLite is putting a lot of their money and a lot of their resources into this. And the fact that we, in some small degree, can have a little bit of an impact and help BioLite pursue this mission is incredible. And so the iterating side of it has really been just discovering clarity and what it is that we need to project to our customers, to our community, to everybody else out there. Is just it's somewhat ironic in that we are discovering clarity, and what it's discovered is that we need to be more clear.
Right.
Which I suppose is a good thing. So that's really been the biggest piece of it. Other than a couple of small things, like I've had to, I've taken a crash course on merchandising, and 90% of people turn right when they enter a store, because most people are right-handed. You'll find, I think there was a statistic that if you're left-handed, you're more likely to turn left into a store. But because most people are right-handed, 90% of people turn right.
Now I'm going to be thinking about it every time I walk in here. Yeah.
So just fun discoveries that actually make a difference. But that all comes back to human psychology.
Yeah.
And so I get to become a psychologist, which is a really fun pathway that I didn't think I would be taking, is discovering the excitement of what works from not just a storytelling perspective, that connective piece, but also just a human psychology. If you put the shirts up front as opposed to out back, does it make a difference?
Yeah.
And I realize that makes it sound very just cold and transactional, but it certainly is a component to it. So that's one of the things that we've been learning over these last couple of months as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's both things, trying to figure out, hey, what's best for us as a business, but that has a large overlap with what builds community, right? And like figuring out the balance of those two things is part of the fun. Your point about the sustainability facts and stories is very interesting, right? I had another guest on here, Anna Yates. She does all the sustainability policymaking and reporting for this company, Albany International, and they big manufacturer of advanced textiles and materials. And so it's like the cutting edge of really hard manufacturing problems. But one thing we talked about a lot was this exact thing of a lot of her job is putting on paper. This is the sustainability stuff of how many tons of waste we produce, how many gigawatts of electricity we consume, and from what sources, right? It's one thing to have all these pieces of information on paper and to explain it to someone, but it's another thing entirely for a real living, breathing human being. What does it mean that we try to be more intentional about, hey, is every part of this done ethically? The people who are working in this, are their lives good? Are they being exploited? And it's easy just to look at a report or a statistic and not really imbibe what it is about. And I think you're right and smart to think about that critically, right? If you're going to explain, sustainability related information to people, to know those stories and to say, hey, here's the top level, quote unquote, impact, right, that this company has in their manufacturing. But here's what it really means. Because we buy these BioLites, 20,000 people, we played a small part in helping these people get on the grid, and, their lives are better because they have electricity and access to basic banking services, et cetera, like all these things that are possible, right?
Going back to the sustainability, or the reason that I wanted all of our apparel and gear, and to some degree, even the wines that we have, to be a part of that sustainability story, that component, really highlighting it and making it front and center, all comes back to slowing down and smelling the roses. Because at the end of the day, our local trail systems, we need to be stewards for those trails. And so part of slowing down is when you see a piece of trash, pick it up.
Yeah.
Put it in your backpack.
Right.
You can throw it away later at home at the trash can they have at the entrance. And so it all comes down to stewarding and making better the places that we love and we find magic and awe in.
Yeah.
In hopes that other people will discover that same level of awe and enjoyment. And that momentum builds in creating more stewards. And so having these brands, these companies, these manufacturers who are prioritizing sustainability, it's in my mind prioritizing stewardship of what's around us, and maintaining and not just mowing down the beauty that's there, and the nature component of it, because it's been such a huge part of my upbringing, was getting outside, and not just outside on the pavement, but outside with dirt, trees,
right,
where you couldn't hear another car, you couldn't hear another person. It was just the birds out there and the wind and the trees, and that's just such an incredible feeling that I think everybody should have access to that same experience. And if we presumably maintain the same trajectory of, just fast fashion, pump and churn, not necessarily going to be there for much longer. So that was the sustainability story of Treeline. It really just was not even a question to begin with. Was no, this is a part of our value, or our values, because of the stewardship component that is inherent in sustainability and sustainable practices. And part of that stewardship also then comes into the social side of the brands that we're carrying. Like we were just talking about BioLite. There's a company called Bergen here in Lincoln, New Hampshire, that gives 5% back to the local communities. And so what they're doing is they're building up a local workforce so that it's not just vacation homes and some of these ski towns, and people who live there can make a real living in these areas, provide to some incredible product, really high quality, and it's made right up the road in New Hampshire. It's not shipped overseas.
Love that.
And so the social story and the social impact then also becomes a sustainability story. And it's just this big full circle, and they keep feeding each other in a positive way, positive flywheel. So these two pieces that get married, if we can continue to seek out brands and people, as we keep talking about, who are providing these impacts, I think that's going to help not only us here at Treeline, the community here on the Seacoast, the community in New Hampshire, New England, and these circles just get larger and larger.
Yeah, I can't help myself with these bad metaphors. We can drive this thing anywhere we want. I think you are a rare intersection of so many things, right? You talk about, hey, I think everyone should have the right to be able to, access nature, access a place outside where they can't hear anything. They can experience the serene, beauty and silence of all I can hear is birds and the wind. But you also love the roar, a 1995 Honda Acti attack dump K-Truck. He's making a face right now. You like both, and I think we need both. And this might be reductive to say, but there's nothing written in the sky that says everyone can't have a great quality of life and we cannot destroy the planet at the same time. There's no reason that can't be true. And folks like yourself who are interested in every piece of this, who are motivated to bring all these people together, to get outside, to have more appreciation, to tell these stories, to support these brands. You're a part of the enchilada, and I'm so glad that I met you. And how fun, too. I don't even think that this is clear necessarily from the podcast episodes I've done, but we do our networking group here now. My Sustainability Brews networking group of people in the Seacoast, the moment you opened up your place, because you're one of us, we were like, obviously, we should do it at Treeline. Like, it's a wicked cool spot, and there's a thematic alignment with these things, and we all love it. We come here once a month. You should come, listeners, if you're around and interested in that. But I find myself doing that on a lot of these episodes. I make a lattice with my fingers and I push them together. All these connections happen. I'm here right now recording this podcast in this really cool place that you let me use because of this organic way that we met. And there is so much to love about that story. And I have so much gratitude. And I am so excited to keep having people here and having them come here and see the place that you have and learn about you, and then to tell their stories and to promote them and have it all be wrapped up in, again, maybe this is a burrito, this one's a burrito, have it all be wrapped up in the burrito of like this story of this network of people who are all doing such cool stuff, making the world a better place. What a joy that it is for me. Cody, would you consider yourself an optimist?
Absolutely.
Why? Have you always been one? Is this something you learned?
I've always been an optimist. I grew up with parents who always saw the positive in people, in situations, but also being self-sufficient enough to handle those situations and scenarios. But you can't handle them with clarity unless you have a degree of optimism, which provides the faith to continue moving forward. Optimism plays a huge role in why Treeline exists and why Three Petals exists.
I guess all entrepreneurs are optimists in nature, aren't they? They have to be.
Optimism allows you to take risks, knowing that you're going to give it your all and tackle any sort of problem, speed bump, barrier that comes your way. Because in my mind, I guess optimism it hasn't removed so many barriers. It's just allowed me to observe a speed bump that's coming up, find a solution, because I know that there is a solution that exists. I just have to go find it or create it, discover it, get over the speed bump, and continue forward after the speed bump. And there's always going to be another one right behind it, but optimism provides the ability to not be afraid about, well, what's next?
Yeah.
What if? What happens when? It's okay, well, there will be a solution. We're going to discover a solution, create one, find one, ask for help.
Right.
And it allows you to take a certain degree of risk. I mean, we're also pushed toward comfort and under the guise of security. Of course, security is first and foremost in our need as being humans. We don't want to be mauled by a tiger.
Right.
So we need to find shelter and food and water. But that seems to have pushed us much too far in the other direction where it's comfort that everybody seeks. And there's no turbidity. There's no, input that creates a wake in most of our lives now. And so having the optimism allows people to create these waves and know that there are going to be good people, there are going to be good outcomes. And there's no such thing as I suppose, a bad outcome. It's how you handle the outcome that dictates who you are, who the people are around you, what it is that you've built. I mean, there are terrible things that happen, absolutely. And I think looking at how the solution is created has a big role in being an optimist.
My wife just read a book about Italian spirituality. I really should have read it because I'm the one who's Italian, but and I'm going to totally butcher this. It actually was funny because the more she read this book, the more she would come to me and say, this is actually a thing that you do. You know, like you clean and it's like a spiritual thing for you. You know, you talk about problems as though, you know, they're small, and then in doing so, they become small problems, you know. And I don't remember exactly what the phrase is, but the translation is like, that's no big deal. And in Italian, it's something like non niente or like something like that. I don't speak it, but it's exactly what you're saying. Of oftentimes the way that we even discuss a problem has bearing on how well we orient towards it being solved. This has become both a thing that I know works naturally well for people, but in my household, it's a thing that we intentionally try and do, of say, hey, that's no big deal, whatever it is. It could be a huge problem. But if you just say, you know, that's all right, we'll fix it, and we have the conviction that it'll be solved, I think there's a lot to be said for that. You are living proof of that mindset at work. I think that there's something here that I can offer the world with my manual transmission skills and my passion for it. There's something here that I think is missing in terms of a third space where people can meet and just exist and loiter in, you know, the outdoor world and all those things. You brought that to life. You are living, breathing, coursing the optimism through your veins, Cody, and you're a New Hampshireite. So it's been a pleasure.
An optimistic New Hampshireite.
That's right.
If you look at a problem and you think these are all the bad things that could happen, that have happened in order to create the problem that exists, that doesn't create action. It's dwelling. It's hindsight, which is all. Hindsight is important to learn from that problem, from if it was a mistake, to learn from the mistake. But what optimism helps to provide is action. Knowing that there is going to be a positive outcome allows you to continuously iterate until there is one.
Right.
The solution you have right now may not be the best outcome. It may create another problem, but when you have the optimism to realize that, okay, well, there will consistently be an opportunity for us to discover a new solution. So the optimism has also kept me a bit of a child. I mean, I still see magic and awe in everything that's out there. And optimism, I think, is one of the most underrated but important attributes and characteristics to carry and to help get out there and share, much like you're doing with this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think that's evident in every interaction that you have with people. I think it's something that a lot of people love about you. You know, I mean, you're a very smart, intelligent person, but you have this childlike awe that you maintain and kind of bring into everything you do, and it's really cool. I think we need more of it.
I feel like my childlike wonder and awe has also meant that a lot of these ideas that I shared and philosophies and visions and passions and values were a bit sporadic as well. So jumped from 3 pedals to YouTube University to sustainability to optimism, kind of jumped around. I feel like it lacked a little bit of a through line on the story side of things, but I think that's part of the fun of being a relatively unfocused optimist.
That's perfect. You know who else was just like that? Leonardo motherfucking da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, who's one of my favorite people.
Middle name.
Yeah, that's right. Italian from Vinici. But yeah, he was just like that. So everyone has a touch of Leonardo in them, and I definitely see that with you. You're very Da Vinci. You know, you can do it all.
Andy, what makes you an optimist?
Oh, don't ask me that. You can't ask me questions. I feel so lucky, Cody, doing this podcast. And honestly, all the people that I talk to, I can't help but feel like an optimist. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I could get into about, you know, why I think it's rational or this or that. But, you know, really, I'm most interested in telling the stories of the other folks on here. For me, it's a conviction, it's a passion. And when I talk to every person who comes on the show or people that they know or, you know, all the amazing things that are going on in the world that I know are happening, it's all what you pay attention to. You know, I can't help but feel like an optimist when I come away from a conversation with you or a conversation with Anna or Fiona or Faina or Jules or Ian or Allison or Zach or Dovev, or who are all the other amazing people who've come on this show. And if I forgot one, I'm really sorry. It's like trying to list the 13 dwarves from The Hobbit, right? Which we can do right now. Let's go. Cody's face is like, no, we can't. I'll do that another time. But yeah, being an optimist is fun too. Like, it's just fun.
Well, thank you for putting out more optimism and more energy into the world by pulling this podcast together, by having guests on, by seeking out and discovering how other people find optimism, what that means to them, how it is that they're pursuing their own vision, their own values as an optimist, or I guess through the lens of an optimist, or discovering optimism, whether it has been inherent from a young age or if it's something that's been learned or discovered. But it's fun to have a conversation like this because optimism is something that nobody ever talks about. They think it's a childish...
They treat it as though it's naive. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which I think the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's this, people see this childish naivete in being optimistic, and they think that you can't see the real world beyond, when there's so much when there's so many horrible things that are happening. But like you were saying, that there's this inherent optimism that exists, this magic that exists of things aren't better, very measurably so, than they were hopefully yesterday or 100 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And it's that continuous push for bettering not just yourself or your community, the people around you, the planet, not just humans, but also the many other billions of life forms that exist on it. And so thank you for spreading that energy and that excitement and optimism and sharing it.
I love most coming on here and having people tell the stories of the often slow, diligent, unsexy, boring. I mean, it's none of those things to the people because they're passionate about it, but to a lay person, right? It's not particularly interesting to be like, why should I care about civics being taught to kids in New Hampshire? Why should I care that kids can have access to toys and free play? Why should I care that, someone is trying to corral textile consumer companies to collectively outsource the incentivization of a better supply chain for regenerative rubber in Thailand, right? Like, there's all these things that may not make sense or sound very sexy at the outset of them, but really that's the only way anything ever gets better, is slow, diligent people working quietly in the background for a long time, right? And I think we should tell more of those stories. So I feel really lucky that I get to talk to all these folks. I feel really lucky that you let me meet them here at this great community hub of Treeline. And I'm very grateful to you for coming on and letting people get to know Cody Whelan and Treeline Outfitters.
Well, thanks, Andy, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Recording space was provided by Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.